And welcome everybody to another edition. I don't know what to call this series. Maybe we'll call it the 50 States of Gun Laws or something like that. But we're watching the Cape Gun Works Rapid Fire Radio show maybe last week, I think. And you said something about what's happening with Massachusetts gun laws. I think you had somebody on talking about the laws there. And actually, you were interviewing somebody who had accomplished some stuff. I forget what the name of that lawyer was. And I think that's when we said, hey, let's do a show and talk about Massachusetts gun law. So we've got Toby Leary on from Cape Gun Works in Massachusetts. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, G-Webs. It's always fun to come on and chat with you.
Right on, it is. And so we're going to do this unscripted and live. It's a fun way. And we've got people joining us live. So I've posted this on a couple of different places so that people knew it was coming. What we're going to do is start off with about a 6-minute video that Toby did back in May. That's kind of when I started following the channel too. It was like right after that. You posted this video not long after I discovered the channel when you were on Riding Shotgun with Charlie. So this one's, it surprised me. I thought it was maybe just a couple of months old, but it's a couple of months old now. And this is kind of a parody, lighthearted look at Massachusetts gun laws, but it's got a lot of conversation going in our chats and on your radio show chat. So I think it's a good way to kind of start off our conversation here. But the goal here tonight, whatever time it is for you, is to just chat about Massachusetts gun laws for the people who live in Massachusetts, to give them a summary or a synopsis, I guess, and for people who don't live in Massachusetts to ask questions to understand and to gain some insight what it's like in one of the states with quite a few infringements. We'll talk a bit about where they got them and the results of them and maybe some potential. Now, Toby's not a lawyer, I'm not a lawyer, but he's lived there his whole life dealing with them, experience them, exist in that. So this video actually, I'm gonna give Toby a second to say anything he might want to start off the show here with, and then we'll play the video, give everybody like 6-minute introduction, lighthearted introduction to it. So feel free to ask questions live, or if you're watching this in the future or listening to it as a podcast, I might put it up audio ways also. Feel free to contact us or Toby. Maybe Toby here will tell us. He knows it off the top of his head, I'm sure, his phone number and the times to call in to participate in the radio show. But yeah, Toby, give us an intro and then we'll start the video.
All right. Yeah, great. Thanks again for having me. And so this is just a small video about, the ridiculousness of all the hoops we have to jump through to get and acquire and exercise your Second Amendment right in Massachusetts. But prior to that, we had, when we decided to open a gun store in Massachusetts, I had a lot of people say, "What are you, crazy? You don't open a gun store in Massachusetts." Even a guy who I was working with at the time, going way back, where this idea first came from, he's like, "You can never open a real gun store with a range and everything in Massachusetts." And I always said, well, I don't think that's true. And I think it's a good idea to do it in Massachusetts because so many people do take the approach that, no, if you really want to enjoy your freedoms, just move out of the state. Well, that's kind of a lame, answer. I think you can do both. Yes, it's harder to exercise your Second Amendment rights in Massachusetts, but it's a worthy endeavor. And so I figured, why not stay and fight rather than take the easy way out and move and do what it is I love to do somewhere else in a gun-friendlier state. So that's basically it in a nutshell. But even from a business decision, once you get through all the red tape, frankly, there's less competition here than if you were in Florida or New Hampshire. So, there's a lot of gun stores, a lot of really good gun stores in those gun-friendly states. And so, part of the business decision to do it here was the fact that it's a high barrier to entry and we could probably perform at a high level and have less competition. So that's just the business fundamentals of it. But frankly, it's where we live, where we grew up, where we have put down roots, and we wanted to stay and fight through the red tape, so to speak, or fight for the good cause behind enemy lines.
Right on. And they certainly make it difficult, and this video will help illustrate that. So again, we're chatting with Toby from Cape Gun Works, and this will be a video that they posted in May to explain how you get a gun in Massachusetts, and then we'll be back, what am I doing, after this to push this button. I think my computer Computer's acting slow again. Yeah, there we go. So we'll be back after the video to discuss it. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them. Otherwise, we'll be talking about Massachusetts gun laws here after the video plays.
Hey, how you doing? So I've finally decided to exercise my Second Amendment right and go ahead and buy a gun. Yes, great. Well, you're in the right place. This is a gun store, and we are here to help. Well, I think I'd like to buy a handgun. Oh, well, sure, no problem. Do you have your license? Like a driver's license? I'm sorry, sir, not a driver's license. You actually need a license to carry in the state. Oh, well, I thought it was like renting a library book from everything I read in the paper. But anyway, okay. Well, how do I get my license to carry? So what you have to do first is you have to sign up for a class, which we offer here, and pay $125 and take the 4-hour class. And you'll be given a certificate that you can then go down to your local police department and apply. Oh, great. Okay, so sign me up. I'm ready to go. All right, and that concludes our 4-hour basic safety class. Here is your certificate. So you may now go down to the police department and apply for your license to carry. Thank you for joining us. See you next time. Oh, hey, how are you? Yeah, I'd like to apply for my license to carry. Okay, great, sir. Do you have your certificate? I did. Here you go. Oh, great, sir. Did you happen to fill out an application? Okay, can I do that right now? That would be a no, because it's a little bit more involved than you think, and you're going to need 3 references on that application. So why don't you come back and get that all filled out? All right, I'll see you soon. Thanks so much. Hi, yeah, I'm here to give you the paperwork for my license to carry application. I got that, my certificate, and my check for $100. Okay, well, welcome back, sir. I see that you have your completed application with your 3 references all filled out. That's great. And I'll need that check for $100. And let's look over your certificate here. And I'm sorry, sir, it doesn't look like you've successfully completed a live fire portion. I thought that was only some towns. Well, that's this town. So you're going to have to get the live fire portion of the class completed. So come on back and get that all filled out. I'll be back. Remember me? Oh, yes, I remember you. You've been in several times now. Looks like you finally got that live fire certificate. Good job. And what about the reference? Yep, 3 references. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so now we need to get you on the schedule to make an appointment with the chief. What do you mean, meet the chief? Meet the chief? I don't understand. Why do I have to meet the chief? The chief can see you in 6 weeks. How does that work? Tuesday the 5th, 2 p.m. Put me down. I'll take another day off of work. Hey, how are you, sir? Yes, sir. Take a seat. Thank you for coming today. And I've been reading over your application here. And just a few questions. Number 1, why is it you want your license to carry? Well, I didn't know I needed a reason to for my right to keep and bear arms, but I would just say for any lawful purpose. We don't accept those terms anymore, sir. So you're going to have to give me another reason besides for any lawful purpose. I thought that kind of covers all the bases, but okay. How about personal protection and for any lawful purpose? So what you're telling me is you need a gun for personal protection. Have you ever been threatened in any way? Well, no. Well, then why do you feel you need a gun? Just in case. All right, so you can see my secretary on the way out, and she will have you fingerprinted and photographed, and we will send all your information to the state for a full comprehensive background check, which we will also do ourselves. And after 1 to 3 months, you should see your license. If you haven't heard from us in 3 months, give us a call. Wait a minute, 3 to 6 months? I thought the state law is you got to respond within 40 days. We all know how realistic that is. I mean, shoot, we're still dealing with COVID-19 stuff. So I do have a right to keep and bear arms, right? Yes, I received a phone call that my license was in. Yes, you got a phone call from us. Okay, great. Let me just find you on the list here. And okay, great. Yep, I got it right in the drawer. And there it is. It is valid for target and hunting, sir. Here you go. Hunting, target and hunting. But I don't even hunt. And I don't understand. I told him I wanted it for personal protection. Sorry, the chief didn't see a need for you to have a gun for personal protection. So when it comes back up for renewal in 5 years, then you can go ahead and reapply, and he may or may not approve it for you at that time. But thank you for coming in and exercising your Second Amendment right to carry. Shall not be infringed? Shall not be infringed? I don't think so.
Right on. So that was from May. Has anything changed since then?
Yeah, a little bit has changed because of the Bruin decision. So,
Oh, hold on. Let's call it the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association decision, since we won, and I like saying New York State Rifle and Pistol Association.
yeah, I always take the shortcut because it's a
I'm trying to buck the trend there. So at the beginning, maybe we can get it switched, but whatever. But I hear you. So after that decision, now things are looking better or have changed?
Things are looking a little bit better, and that is that they rushed through legislation to basically take away the language that said um, chiefs have discretion. So the one part of that video where the chief was saying, "Oh, do you need it for, why do you need it for personal protection?" And he could say, "No, I'm only issuing it for target and hunting." That happened in a lot of towns. In most town, I mean, not most, in some towns, especially around Boston, all those chiefs had this consortium of they would not issue a license to carry for any lawful purpose. They would only do it for target and hunting purposes. So, and then in other towns that would issue it for any lawful purpose, would still sometimes restrict it if they didn't know you or like you or thought you were living in a bad area or for whatever reason. They didn't
And we're
need to give
talking a concealed carry permit, not a right to own a pistol permit.
It's one and the same.
Oh,
In this state, you can't buy a pistol without your license to carry, and the license to carry could be regulated by to originally it was actually two different licenses, Class A and Class B. They finally got rid of that, and now it's just a license to carry, but they still left the discretionary um, issuance by the chief, the local chief. So he could say, "Yeah, I'll give it to you for target and hunting." And that's what happened to me. My first license to carry that I got at 18, they would not issue it to me for any lawful purpose. They only did it for target and hunting, which is ridiculous because you can't really hunt with a pistol in this state anyway. There's limited exceptions to that you can. Um, and then, secondly, target shooting means like you're allowed to go to and from the range. And so if you stop at the store and run in for a soda and you get jammed up having a gun on you, you could really be in a lot of trouble. So they took away the discretionary power of the local chief and said that can no longer restrict it. And he also doesn't have the discretion as to whether to issue it or not. If you could pass a background check, then they have to give you the license. It became a may issue and went to a shall issue based on that New York State Pistol and Rifle Association case. The part where they really screwed up is they left the suitability language in there. So they're like, so as long as you can pass the background check and you're not a prohibited person and you're suitable, which who the hell knows what that means, then you can get your license to carry, which that decision had nothing to do with suitability, right? In fact, that's the exact thing they were addressing in New York, was the suitability of issuing licenses. And they would basically say, they had broad discretionary powers as to whether to issue or deny you. And so that's exactly what happened with uh, that decision as it came down. And so Massachusetts, trying to come into compliance with that decision, left language in there that still leaves the door open for some sort of discretion based on suitability, which is this etherical, hypothetical, very subjective term. And I think they're going to have some serious lawsuits on their hand. The good news is I don't think chiefs will take that on anymore. Like a chief of police, unless you're really anti-gun, isn't going to say, well, under this advisory notice that the governor and the attorney general issued, suitability is something that comes into question. I have had a police department threaten suitability on me personally as a gun dealer, and hold that over our head and basically say, look, this calls into question whether you're suitable to deal in firearms. And the funniest part of that was, the reason he was calling my suitability into question was because we held a raffle when we opened this store. We did a fundraiser. We raffled off a Barrett MRAD with a real nice Leupold scope on it, and sold like 50 raffle tickets or 200 raffle tickets at $50 a piece to raise some money. And after the rifle was paid off, I think it left $1,500 to go into our range fund. And I had no idea this was illegal because hardware stores do it, all these local stores do it, and no one ever says anything. Like, I've bought raffle tickets and to win a canoe or win a trip to whatever, and then come to find out, the chief kind of freaked out and said, "This is racketeering and illegal gaming activity, which has a 10-year prison sentence and a $10,000 fine for the first offense. And, you're seriously calling into question your suitability." And, I said, look, honestly, I'm sorry. But here's some pictures of all the local hardware stores and the other competitive gun shop down the road, their Facebook page with the raffles they've hosted. So unless you're going to go, do a town-wide sweep through all these illegal gaming facilities, I think, we can just say, I take the hint, we'll leave as friends and it won't happen again. And I think that's a good outcome, right? And so that deflated him a little bit, but he seriously threatened suitability with me. Fortunately, that chief retired. He's no longer the one I have to deal with. But, so they take this suitability seriously and think it gives them a lot of power and discretion in their ability to issue licenses in this state.
And sounds like that was there before the New York State Rifle Association decision anyway. They're just using that as they're hanging on with that, because even though they have to, like you say, make the major swing from may issue to shall issue. In other words, states used to have a discretion if they wanted it on who to issue permits to, or they could default to, you just can get a permit if you ask for one. Then the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association effectively said states don't have the right, because of the way we interpret the Second Amendment, states don't have a right to make some certain determination of may issue. So the way I'm going to look at that is, you had this gate that was closed, and the Supreme Court said, no, you got to leave that gate open. And your state had this caveat or whatever that said, well, sheriffs can have a chain on the gate. So whether or not we have to leave the gate open is no difference, because sheriffs have always had, or I guess in this case, chiefs have always had this chain on the gate, and they can determine. So my question is, if you're looking at it from that angle, if they've said, if New York State Rifle and Pistol Association decision has effectively told the states, you're not going to win if you try to come up with non-constitutional grounds for your infringements. So they're going to say, oh, well, we have this thing from before, and we're going to leave it up to the local authorities, so we don't have to worry about it. The question is, does that leave enough slack, right? So they're effectively saying, chiefs of police, you can put a chain on there if you want, how many of the chiefs are going to say, yeah, sure, we're going to put a chain on there, but it's 14 inches long and whoever wants to go through the gate can because it's effectively open, but we're leaving it here for obligation. And then how, like you said, just a few chiefs are going to say, aha, we have our infringement back, and they're going to apply it like they always have. So I guess I'm asking, did it still make a change and it's allowing some of those police chiefs who, like you say, are not necessarily pro 2A, but just really don't care or just see that there's no money to enforce some of this garbage, like the way you describe it in the video, having to meet the chief of police? How could they get any work done if they got a stream of people wanting to make appointments with them?
Yeah, it really is ridiculous. And that will still happen. And that doesn't happen in every town. And the part of the video where like he comes in with the certificate and they go, oh, it's not, it doesn't say you did a live fire class.
It's
That's
like
not a,
worst case.
what's that?
It's like worst case in the video.
Well, a lot of towns do require that, and it's not a state law. It's not a requirement in the code. And so just police have just said, well, we think you should have to have shot a gun before we're going to issue. It comes back to that gray area of their discretion. So I don't know if that's going to get expanded upon or to go away. I have a feeling it's going to get worse before it gets better. Um, I
But
think if we,
worse in like Boston and one or two other places, and then a lot better everywhere else, or worse in the whole state until it
I
gets
think
better.
it'll be worse in the whole state because, I'm still not willing to concede that Maura Healey is going to be the next governor. So the attorney general that has done so much anti-gun damage to the Second Amendment community in the last 5, 6 years, well, probably a little more than that since 2016. So really, yeah, 6 years, um, is running for governor, and she is the favored to win. Um, and the guy running against her is a Republican who's a Trump endorsed candidate. So everybody's like, oh, great, a Trump endorsed candidate is the nominee. There's no chance this guy's going to win in a blue state like Massachusetts. So I think if she does get into the corner office, there's enough, and the legislature is held by an unbelievable, uh, unequal, Democrats versus Republicans. Like I think the House is like 165 members of Congress are Democrat, and there's 27 members of Congress that are Republican.
Ouch.
And
So
this,
it's all blue and it's not going anywhere. So
right,
the
and
best thing you could have hoped for is like another blue that would be less worried about guns and more worried about like the economy or something, so that they had a chance.
yeah, at the last minute, there was this big effort to try to elect this guy Chris Doughty as the Republican nominee. I had already endorsed Jeff Deal, so I wasn't going to go back on my word on that, and I had no clue where Chris Doughty stood on firearms. He seemed like a good businessman and very practical, um, you know, fiscal conservative, etc. And they were saying he has a better chance of defeating Maura Healey, but honestly, I don't think so. And if that's the case, I think I'd rather go for the pro-gun candidate. And the guy Jeff Deal who's running is, um, like I said, a Trump endorsed candidate who might get some sort of bump as a result of that. It also could go the other way. But the bottom line is, in either case, the House and the Senate have enough votes to overturn a veto anyway. So I think the House and the Senate will propose some new gun control legislation going forward, and either Maura Healey will sign it or Jeff Deal will veto it, and then they'll overturn his veto. That's just the way I see it. Until these things are challenged in court, because we're already getting the usual suspects of, anti-gun congressmen talking about ghost gun regulations and, quote unquote ghost guns. There's a big article that came out today about that, and they've been at a Mexican standoff for the last 5 or 6 years. In other words, Gun Owners Action League has Jim Wallace as the president, and He's very good. He's an NRA board member, but he's an extremely good advocate up on Beacon Hill, and has managed to work very well in the system with a lot of these anti-gun politicians, and managed to just maintain the status quo. We haven't had any new gun control legislation really voted out of committee, and we also haven't seen any of our rights restored in any way, shape, or form, other than what took place at the Supreme Court level. So I know the legal challenges are going to start to come forward, and already have, in the court system, and that's going to make the other side want to counteract, just like Governor Hochul did in New York. They're not going to take it sitting down. They're going to want to act. So this is the fight ahead of us. The stuff we're dealing with already is like the video showed. I got to make a part 2 on that, which shows what you actually have to go through when you buy a gun, because that's another whole side of the equation that we're going to do literally another whole video on. But yeah, so I still see it getting worse before it gets better, but I think it will ultimately get a lot better as a result of the court challenges that'll go through, thanks to the gift that Clarence Thomas gave us in that Supreme Court ruling.
Right on. Well, I appreciate you summarizing it too with like that question, because I'm just realizing that this kind of been haphazard. So I appreciate everybody who's watching. I didn't script this or come up with anything with Toby other than let's set some time aside to talk about Massachusetts gun laws. Obviously, it's a complex thing. We started off with the video and asked folks to check out or watch the video to kind of get a summary of the laws, and then ask people to ask questions. Then we kind of just started talking. So I appreciate it's a little sloppy, and I'm going to use this maybe as a way to kind of focus in on a way to do a summary conversation. So let me jump back to a question from One Love from earlier when we asked for people to ask questions. Throw it up on the screen here. So for question for Massachusetts residents and a license to carry. If you have 5 misdemeanors, 3 of which are convictions and 2 are non-convictions, none are punishable by more than a year, what are the odds of getting approved for a license to carry? So, there's all that ordeal, and then there's how they're going to scrutinize your application, whether or not they're just going to be a bureaucrat and push it through, or do they scrutinize it, I guess? Or
yeah, no, I think prior to the Supreme Court decision, it would have been very difficult. You probably would have at least got told that you couldn't get a license to carry, but you will get a FID card. And an FID card allows you to buy a long gun, rifle or shotgun, as long as it's not capable of accepting a high capacity magazine and it's not semi-automatic. So you could have a low capacity semi-automatic rifle, as long as it doesn't hold more than 10 rounds and it's not capable of accepting a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds. So like I just sold a guy today with an FID card, one of our fixed mag AR-10 308s, which has the Darkstorm lower on it that doesn't have a mag release at all, so you can't take the mag out of the gun. So he was able to do that, but that's probably what would have happened, because the FID card was always may issue and the LTC was shall issue. But now I think you have a pretty good opportunity to appeal it if you're denied by your local chief. And as long as you don't have some sort of offense that you've been convicted of, that you can be punished by 2 years in prison. If it's punishable by 2 years in this state, that's a disqualification for any license to carry. So yeah, I think and I think federally it's 2.5 years. So we're a little more stringent than the federal law. So I think you'd be fine.
right on, thanks. And again, I apologize because we're not really doing this in any kind of order that makes any sense. It's more of just a kind of a chat about the laws. And I made some notes here because I didn't want to interrupt as you were making your points. So one of the things you mentioned was the suitability. So in other words, using the laws there as weapons, or holding them as, well, what's that called? I guess as a weapon, like weaponizing them by saying, holding it over your head. Like, since the laws are so crazy and all I have to do is throw one stick in the works and it's going to disrupt everything for you, you pretty much have to do what I want. You got that potential abuse from all different kinds of level of bureaucracy when that happens. But that's something that's just happens when you've got a lot of population and big bureaucracies and stuff that people depend on. I mean, or is that something that you think can change? In other words, is it ingrained in the system, or is it something that the bad people are abusing their places, and once they're gone, it goes away and things get better?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really did go right down the line of the pro-gun or anti-gun chief of police, because they were the ultimate issuing authority, is your local chief. So we had some people that would say had a business in our town in Barnstable, and they're a fairly gun-friendly town to deal with, but they might have come from a town that was not a gun-friendly town, but they had a place of business, and you can apply for the license to carry in the town that you have a place of business in. In fact, I got a call from somebody the other day on one of the shows, that had applied in the town of where their place of business was, and the chief denied him. And then he appealed it, and they went to court. And then after the court hearing, a couple months have gone by, and he hasn't heard from anyone. Well, I found out they have 10 days to respond after a court appearance. So really, the court's way out of compliance with that. So let's put it this way: there's nobody with a fire lit under their butt in this state to give you your uh, license to carry or to allow you to exercise your right to keep and bear arms. The state is required to either issue or deny you within 40 days, and that never happens. Very, very rarely. So what we've seen is very anti-gun chiefs of police that would give the bare minimum, limit you to target and hunting, and then as they retire and a good one comes into place, they change all that, which is nice. Sometimes it goes the other way. We had a town on Cape Cod where there was a it was very easy to get your license, and now the new chief is one of those chiefs that requires an appointment and a sit down across the desk from the chief, and he wants to ask you questions and ask you why you want a license to carry. And now that was part of the thing that was found unconstitutional. Like, they can't ask why you want to exercise your right to keep and bear arms. That's ridiculous. We wouldn't tolerate that with any other right. Like, you'd never say, "Oh, why do you feel you need to have a Fourth Amendment right to unlawful searches and seizures?" Like, why? You know, what do you mean, why? It's my right as an American citizen that was endowed by my creator. I don't have to justify to you why I don't want the police coming in my house anytime, day or night, and searching through my stuff, right? But all of a sudden, when it came to guns, we really, and I'm not saying we as gun owners, but we as a society have given power to people in a lot of areas where we shouldn't have, and where they don't have that authority, other than they gave it to themselves and they can lord it over you. But so sometimes it gets better, sometimes it gets worse based on the town. And we saw during the COVID restrictions, there was so many people applying for their license to carry during the shutdown, that towns started to make extra requirements, like you got to appear in person, and you can't because we're closed because of COVID. You got to take a live fire, and you can't because all the ranges are closed. So they started to layer on the requirements, and that's exactly what New York did with their crazy 8-step application process. And so that's what we're starting to see. Some towns that are more anti-gun or less favorable to you exercising your rights, they're going to just continue to layer on the requirements rather than, going the other way and saying, "Hey, Supreme Court has spoken. who've been doing it all wrong. And now come on down. We'll take your picture. We'll photograph you, do the background check, and within a couple days, here's your license. Should be no fee, and it should be good for life until it's suspended or revoked. If you're going to even require someone to have a license, because I think that's all unconstitutional too. But we'll see how that goes in the future. But um, yeah,
Well, we've got questions coming in, but I'm going to take a second there to try to experiment with something here that I'm thinking might work for this project and going forward. So I'm going to move us to the bottom, and what I've got on the screen is a map or a group of maps, I guess, that I've been working on as part of the Minuteman University project, where we attempt to put all the resources that might be necessary for Second Amendment activists to do our thing better. So it's just a bunch of these different maps, and up towards the top is we have some of the worst stuff, permits required to purchase and stuff like that, restrictions, and then towards the bottom we have just more interesting stuff, and some of the good stuff is in here too. But I'm thinking this might be a way to kind of do, if you don't mind, Toby, like a lightning round, and maybe this will be a way to start this in the future. And these maps, I try to keep them up to date, but it's just me, so they might be a little bit off, especially when things change. But permit required to purchase. In other words, do you have to have some kind of a okay from the country, from the state, before you can even consider to purchase a gun?
yep.
Okay, then permit required to own. Can you move to the state and already own a gun, and now you got to get a permit before you can even legally stay in possession of it?
Yes, you have to get a permit. You are given a 45-day grace period. They're never going to issue the license within that 45 days, but as long as you've applied, I think they'll cut you some slack. So, but you only have 45 days of moving into the state to apply for your license to carry, which could be tough for some people that are there getting set up in a new job, new school for the kids, new furniture, getting the house set up, getting utilities transferred over, getting all that, getting unpacked. And oh, yeah, shoot, we got to go down and take a class, a 4-hour minimum class. And it may or may not involve live fire, depending on the town they live in, and go apply all within 45 days of moving to the state if you come there with firearms.
And I'll just, again, these maps could be out of date. I don't think this one is. Massachusetts has that requirement. Illinois has the requirement because you have to get an FOID there. And then Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. That's it. So that's a pretty heinous one. And like you just mentioned, who moves to a state with nothing to do? Oh, I got, like you can't have your oldest kid go to accomplish this for you. You can't have your wife go do this for you, or your husband. Like everybody has to go do this themselves.
And I don't
Fire.
know if that part of, sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if that part of the video really, that's the most egregious part, is you almost never successfully go to the police station and get your application stamped and pay your fee and get your pictures taken and your fingerprints done the first time. There's always a reason to turn you around and send you out the door and make you come back again. Like, oh, you forgot this, or you forgot that, or you need this, or you need that, or this person's not in today. You'll have to come back tomorrow. Oh, they're at lunch and they need to do the photos and fingerprints, or make an appointment with the chief or whatever. So it's usually 3 trips to the police department just to get your license issued in the first place.
One of my questions that I have in my notes is that written down anywhere? I'm assuming it's not, but just to ask, does the Attorney General or the Department of Public Safety or somebody in the state make a bullet point list of all the things you may have to do, or is it, because it's up to the cities, just up to the person and where you live to figure it out?
No, I do believe that there is a frequently asked questions page on the Department of Public Safety. Um, I believe there is.
That's better than nothing, because then at least all the instructors and all the gun shops have a place to link to offer what's current, even though it might not be great. But
Yeah, there's I just went to the mass.gov, and then there's a mass.gov/how-to/apply-for, it's this long URL, but basically how to apply for a firearms license. And there's like a couple of paths you can go for an FID or a LTC. and what you need, and it's, a pretty long laundry list of stuff you need. You got to submit proof of residence. You got to go to your local firearms licensing officer, take a class, pay the fee, um, and submit other forms of ID. Um, so yeah, um, but it looks like it's pretty easy if you go to the website. In reality, it's extremely frustrating.
Let's see. So then registration, they know what you own.
Absolutely. There
Oh,
is
really?
a way.
It's no
There,
registration. So I have to update my list, my map.
yeah, there is a way to um, not have to register, and that is um, if you move here and the guns came with you. In other words, they weren't on a moving truck or they weren't being shipped to the local gun dealer, but you literally packed them up and they were in your possession and you moved here with them, then you don't need to register those particular guns. It's kind of one of those really gray area loopholes that not too many people know about. Someone took me to task on the Grace Curley show, who was an ex ATF agent, and he said, I'm giving out horrible advice and I'm going to get a lot of people in trouble by saying that. And I said, hey, prove me wrong. And I even had Keith Langer on, who actually represented somebody who got charged with failure to register a firearm under that statute when they brought them with them from out of state, and they won because there's no law that says you have to. Now, if you were to like make a firearm in this state, you got to register it. If you were to get one shipped in, obviously, when you go to the FFL to pick it up, they're going to register it. And if you do a private transfer, there's a registration process. So the funniest part of it all, though, is Massachusetts doesn't call it a registration. But it is
Okay.
registration. It is 100%
What do they
registration.
call it? Or what is
They
it?
call it the Mass Gun Transaction Portal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that might be why when I did whatever research, it didn't show up. But I'm going to switch it to parcel registration, and I'll make a note that it's because of they don't call it that, and that kind of moving in situation where if you didn't purchase them there, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, they call it the steps to record a private firearm sale or transfer, and but they don't call it registration.
And
But
while if somebody passes and you get inherited a bunch of property, including firearms, is that the apply? Does that situation apply?
um, you need to register them anytime a
Because they go through a 4473, they would get onto this system. It's not
yeah,
like there's any just transfer, like here's your grandpa's shotgun in,
yeah.
in
I,
Massachusetts.
I actually stand corrected. I'm on the website now, and it says the Mass Gun Transaction Portal is used to report all private firearms transactions in the Commonwealth, including the personal sale or transfer of any firearm or the registration or inheritance of a firearm. So they do use the word registration.
Oh, snap. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so that's sorry to hear, but magazine capacity restriction. I'm not trying to rub this in. These are just the different elements. I'm not. I
Yep.
apologize that they are coming in this order, but magazine capacity.
Correct. Yep. We are a banned state we are allowed pre-ban as long as they were manufactured prior to the federal assault weapons ban. So if
They
they're
used to sell a lot of magazines back in the early days to people back east because they needed them now because that's how they could prove that they existed or whatever. They already owned
right,
them.
right,
I'm going to update this map with the number of rounds too, because not every state is 10. Some of them.
right.
Yours is 10 though.
Yep.
Now a new one is the home built or 80% or ghost gun or however they want a terminology to try to confuse and scare people. But home built firearms restrictions, do any exist yet?
No regulations on those yet. In fact, this is one area I think we actually have a slight advantage over other states, um, because Massachusetts does not recognize a frame or a lower as a firearm, even if it's federally regulated. So, like an AR-15 lower is not regulated in any way, shape, or form in Massachusetts. Even though the Attorney General's enforcement notice says it is, it's not. And she threatens to, charge you with a felony if you're found in possession of anything that could be readily assembled into an assault weapon. But if you look under the Mass General Law of the definition of a firearm, it has to go bang in order to be considered a firearm. So parts of a gun, even if it's a serialized firearm, according to the feds in Massachusetts, it is not a firearm.
That's not them being cool or trying to be generous? That's just old law or something, or was
Old
it
law that
bad law?
old law that they probably, these aren't gun people. They don't even know
They just
gun
didn't
how.
realize.
Yeah. What's
So,
that?
duty to inform if you are carrying, someone does carry. It looks like
Nope.
you've got a duty to inform if asked. That's how most of the country is.
Yeah, I think if asked, you do, but you don't have to volunteer that information.
And that's good. That's often, I think, better because it just flusters people. And I feel that from just being interacting with police officers in different parts of the country and occasionally asking this question in live chats and getting feedback, uh, when police officers deal with firearms more often, they're more familiar with them and stuff. So when they're constantly worried about it, getting told anyway. So I think that there's more familiarity. They become more normalized and they don't need to worry about it. Purchase age restriction. It looks like you've got a state restriction on private sales purchase. So I guess private sales, you can't sell to 18. Is that what that means? So is there any purchase age restrictions in
I
Massachusetts?
think you can, but you gotta follow the standards. And this changed because when I was 18, I could buy a pistol from a private party, but I could not buy one from an FFL, which
Right.
was
And that's been
firearm.
the same since 68 national levels. They changed Title II and said, you have to go to an FFL to buy a handgun. So that means anybody who buys a handgun from FFL has to follow their rules, and we'll make the rule that you have to be 21. 10
Right,
questions, 2473.
right.
So, okay, so now that's if you go to a FFL, right? Or if you
Right.
go to a FFL at a gun show. But if you just go to a regular individual, or your parents want to just give you one, or your grandpa wants to give you one or something, in Massachusetts, you can't get because you can't be given one or take possession of one at 18
You
permanently.
can, as long as it's not a pistol.
Well, it's
Um,
on pistol, sorry, but
right.
rifle and shotgun is okay, but not pistol. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. If it has to be a low capacity semi-automatic rifle or any other configuration, like a bolt action's fine, a slide action, a single shot, pump action,
Now, I
straight
should ask
bolt.
also, is that something that, although you're in the clear now, is that something that they've, or not in the clear, but you're not under an infringement right now? Is that something that they've been pursuing at all, or have they left these
Yeah,
alone?
they want to raise the purchase age for everything to 21.
Okay.
That's been some stuff that's come up, but I don't know if it ultimately will or not.
That's such a tough one with, 18. Well, there's drinking age there, there's military stuff there, there's taxes, there's punishment for crimes, federal, felonies and stuff when you're 18. So the idea that they can just pluck this one right and adjust it, change it, that's such a assumption that they can do that in front of everybody about gun ownership, instead of all those other things. But I guess that's how all those other ones got shifted. That might be an interesting topic for somebody who's looking for something to research or to do a presentation on is the 18 and how 18 to 21-year-olds have been marginalized and used as pawns in some kind of weird game over time in different realms like that.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, there's a lot of gun owners that think that age should be raised to 21. And surprising to me, uh, I got taken a task on it several times on the Grace Curley show by gun owners. And I've also had some of the most contentious debates by people, whether they're gun owners or not, about just they want to unilaterally, federally raise the age to purchase any type of firearm to 21. And I'm like, that's ridiculous because there's millions of 18-year-olds out there, 18, 19, 20-year-olds that are not committing crime and not using guns for nefarious reasons. and they shouldn't be punished for the sins of other people. That doesn't make sense at any other age.
Yeah, for
Like,
so few people too. It's not even like they're the ones doing anything. Usually the bad stuff is, a spectrum. It's certainly not just that one age group by any means.
right, yeah, and there's plenty of 47-year-olds that are idiots with guns. Are we gonna now ban guns for all 47-year-olds? Because there was, several that went nuts and, did something stupid? Like, that's the logic, and it doesn't work.
State preemption. So the idea that the locality, cities, states, or not cities, cities, counties, and that kind of thing can create laws that apply, although they might conflict with state laws. So most states say, no, the state overrides. This map is really wrong because I know Nevada's partial, and G23 is saying that Oregon no longer has prevention or preemption. So you've got no preemption, meaning I'm guessing because there's so many towns in Massachusetts that predate the country, let alone the state.
I disagree with that. I think there is preemption because
Oh,
there
okay.
it's different from every town how that chief wants to issue the license, and none of it lines up with state law. I mean, some of it does, but state law is a very loose guideline, and then you got town to town differences. Like
Well,
the
no, but I'm saying
Boston
here
the
at one
Boston
part of the country, the state law applies, period. And then the city makes up another town or law, then it gets
Yeah,
overridden by the state. But out in the red states, it's the other way around, where the city's laws apply over the state laws.
yeah, that would be us. Yeah,
Yeah, okay. And
sorry.
yeah, but like I say, I think I've got this one. I know I try to do these things sometimes, and I get lose track of them. Castle doctrine. Looks like you've got castle doctrine.
We do. That was one of the wins that happened in the last 10 years.
So it's a recent win. Is it something that they're upset about? And I know sometimes that one's used politically. Is it one that's on the radar for them, or is it kind of at rest right now?
It's at rest. I don't think that one's going to be challenged at all. The duty to retreat in your own home was a real cluster bomb for self-defense cases because, you know, like the courts could never rule on it because, oh, the guy retreated to the basement and then the guy followed him down and he shot him, but yet there was a bulkhead and there was a little basement window that he could have crawled out of and he didn't exhaust all that's ridiculous. It's like, so they finally did away with that and just went to in the home. A man's home is his castle, so that's good news.
Let's take a quick intermission. And what's that crank behind you there? People asking.
Oh yeah, that's it's a SBR that a local gun dealer built back in 2012. And well, he didn't build the whole thing. He took a pistol and made it into a rifle.
Okay.
And he registered it and had it in his collection, and he surrendered his license, his FFL, I should say, and it's in for gunsmithing right now, and pending a Form 4 transfer between him and another guy. So we brought it in for gunsmithing and testing and to replace any broken or worn parts prior to the sale. And then when the Form 4 comes in, we're going to sell it to a buyer. So nice little Arsenal SL 106, I think it is.
A Bulgarian pistol, effectively made as to be imported for that purpose, and then right on.
Yeah, so it had the 922R stuff done to it, and it's got a Viltor stock, and which may or may not stay on the end user. We'll see.
And going back to stand your ground then. So stand your ground is being able to defend yourself without running away. Castle doctrine is being able to do that in your house or in your vehicle or something. So some places differentiate, it can only happen here or it can only happen in these circumstances, but looks like it's the same for Massachusetts. You're good to go there.
No, we actually do not have stand your ground in Mass.
Okay, so you have castle doctrine where if you're at home, you're okay to defend yourself, your property. Well, defend yourself, probably not your property, and then in stand your ground. that would mean like I'm standing minding my business on the street over here or at someplace, and somebody starts doing something, you don't have the right to defend yourself there. You're supposed to run away.
Correct. You have a duty to retreat in Massachusetts.
I shouldn't say
And
it. You're right. You have a duty to retreat, and if you can't, then you have a
yeah,
right to defend yourself. But you typically sometimes they just say it. No, if you've got some alternative method, and I guess the idea there is to more cast the blame on the victim and say, you weren't. It was up to you as a victim to constantly be aware of how to run away. So if somebody attacks you, you're able to dart away. That's your responsibility as a potential victim, right?
right. And
It's tough to explain until you have a court case or something to create news hype around. Because it seems in my experience, just as being around in the world, it usually is after a news cycle or like some kind of situation that people start to question their state's position on that. But it doesn't just come out of nowhere usually, unless I don't know.
yeah, they certainly want to make it so that the victim has to prove they were justified in shooting. And I would almost guarantee that if you ever need to use a firearm in a self-defense case in Massachusetts, you will be arrested and your gun will be seized until the pending the outcome of the
It's more
investigation.
procedure than right. Like that's just
Yeah,
their method of operation more than like. And then NFA firearms restrictions. So no NFA items at all. Well, that can't be because you've got one right behind you there. Or is
right.
it going to the state?
It's a really interesting kind of cornucopia of how it deals with NFA items. You can own machine guns in Massachusetts.
Oh,
You,
Charlie, Ryan talking with Charlie has mentioned the machine gun license. So in addition to your license to own and your license to carry, which used to be separate, but now after New York State are the same, if I understand, you also have a license for a machine gun. So
correct. Yep. It is a licensed thing and it's very difficult to get. There's a two-pronged issuance of it. The one that applies to most civilians is you are a bona fide collector of firearms. That's the only way they're going to issue uh, a license to non-law enforcement. So the best way to do that is to urge people to get their Type 3 FFL, their Curio and Relics license. Then they can say, oh, here it is. Here's the piece of paper. I'm a bona fide collector of firearms. Like I used to think you'd have to prove what's in your collection. And if somebody says whether that's collectible or not, you're screwed. But that really, they don't go that deep. It's really like you produce a piece of paper, says, look, I got a Curio and Relics license. I'm a collector and I want to enhance my collection. Okay, fair enough. They know it's a rich person's sport anyway. So, but some towns just won't issue it. Period. So you might have to sue or go, appeal a decision. Some towns won't even accept the application because then they haven't given you a denial, which is really weird. And at that point, you got to get a lawyer involved. Um, you cannot own, possess, or even, and the possess is the strictest definition of it. In other words, even temporarily, a suppressor. So suppressors are like, you know, nuclear weapons in this state. They are really looked at worse than machine guns, if you will. Um, so we've had legislation that's been introduced in the past. Hearing Protection Act was one of them, and it didn't go very far. It failed. I don't think it got out of like the second committee it went to. So it never went to a full floor vote. But hopefully that'll be resurrected. Um, Hopefully we can prove like, hey, there's 42 other states that you can legally have suppressors. And frankly, no one likes gunshots. No one likes to hear them. So maybe we'll get that win. You can legally own SBRs and SBSs. SBSs are limited to factory short-barreled shotguns. So you can't you can't form a shotgun in this state. So that's illegal. But if it's a factory short-barreled shotgun, then you can technically own them. It's very difficult, but you can.
And I mean, I don't know if you were paying attention as all of these things happened and when they happened, if you even were able to do that, if they happened in your lifespan. But are these, again, like something happened and they went, oh, short shotguns are horrible, and they got rid of short shotguns, and then oh, suppressors are horrible? Or was it like one stroke of a pen and a bunch of things were just taken out as a group? Or do you know?
I don't know when short-barreled shotguns. Well, let's put it this way. Short-barreled shotguns and short-barreled rifles, I'm going to say the state doesn't really address it. They do a little bit. And it's one of those, the state doesn't know what they're doing and they step on their own, you know what? That's the way they address it. They kind of did it by accident.
Yeah, like they
And
just kind of fumbled into it and then went, oh,
yeah,
good, leave it there.
and it's basically by defining what a firearm is, or defining what a shotgun is, or defining what a rifle is. And they don't really define what a short-barreled rifle is, or an NFA item, or a short-barreled shotgun, other than that one asterisk is the short-barreled shotgun must be originally manufactured by the OEM as a short-barreled shotgun. That's the only way you can own one in mass.
And they probably thought, like, aha, we got them, because no one does that. And then all of a sudden people started making them, and then they're like, oh, well.
Yeah.
Because they make bad law, and then people comply with the law, and then they call it a loophole.
Right. And then the machine gun side of things got a lot worse. It used to be that, like, you could, if you had a machine gun, you could take a bunch of buddies to the range and you could all shoot it and have fun as long as they were under your direct control. But that all changed because we had a machine gun shoot in Hanson, and it was under the chief of Hanson's machine gun permit was the machine gun shoot. And it made national news. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but a 16-year-old RSO on the machine gun line let a 8-year-old kid shoot a micro Uzi while his dentist father videoed from behind, and the kid just pulled the trigger and the gun went straight up into his face and killed him. And the RSO was 16 years old. He was just being the cool kid on the range, and whoever was running it and organizing it didn't really pay attention to what he was doing. So it was a bad kind of, comedy of errors, bad comedy of errors that resulted in an 8-year-old's death, and the state just shut it down. At that point, there were no more machine gun shoots. There was no. They basically said, under the strictest scrutiny of the word possession, so you can't even temporarily possess a machine gun unless you hold a machine gun license. So that kind of put the kaput seize on all machine gun shoots. And like, we were going to rent out machine guns on our range, and we did it for a little while on Fridays, full auto Fridays. And we actually thought that if we tether it to the bench with a chain so that that person can't walk out of the booth with it, are they really in possession of it? So we started doing it. I kicked it around with my lawyer, and he's like, yeah, you're really walking the knife edge on this. And then I found out through the grapevine, a local cop tipped me off that the AG was investigating us for machine gun shooting rentals at our range. And so we just pulled the plug on it and said, all right, I'm not going to die on this battlefield. I don't want to sit here and have hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal bills to defend myself against something that's making me, pennies on the dollar as a business decision. So we made the business
normalize the recreational use of firearms, but they've got the what's it called, the infinite funds of government to come at you with that and just
right.
Make it difficult.
Right. And sorry, go ahead.
Well, just to keep moving, so machine guns are, well, actually all the NFA items are kind of separate then in Massachusetts, and it sounds like it's the result of a bunch of chaos. And that's one of the things that they use against us, and one of the, just kind of taking a bird's eye view, that's one of the reasons I try to attempt to do this stuff, is to at least offer some clarity so that one, people can understand the complexity and where the complexities are. But some of this, visually, to see that while there are some heinous stuff happening in some states, and it kind of looks like it's a few states, think of the populations involved here and think of the connotations and when we're trying to normalize firearms ownership, where our effort is best. Do we normalize firearms ownership in Montana, where 16 people are probably already cool with guns anyway, or in a place like Massachusetts, where your efforts with the radio show, getting guns out there, answering questions on the Grace Curley show, which isn't a gun show, but devotes 45 minutes or whatever on Tuesdays each week, so that people can call in and discover and learn. And again, when you give them clarity, they can take that to a dinner table or to a church, school, civic organization, and when a conversation comes up, they've got more insight on it. And that's how we eventually create change, right? It's by making awareness of this stuff. So I appreciate taking the time. We're still an hour in, or a little over now.
I just lost you a little bit there.
Oh, I'm losing my internet there. I was saying we're about an hour in. I don't know how much of that other stuff got cut off. I was just kind of taking a break since we're at the hour point. Did you want to start wrapping up, or do you still got time?
I got some time if you want to keep rolling for a little bit. Sure.
So I was just saying, thanks again for taking the time to chat about this. Our goal here, the big picture, is to offer insight and some comparison and some with the visualization, some idea of like the perspective on this stuff. While we have a lot of infringements in few states, it can be a lot of the population and vice versa. There's a lot of the country that doesn't deal with this stuff, and we may not realize just the burden, the number of things that are dealt with in some of these states. And they don't talk about it all the time. A lot of people don't talk about all the horrible stuff. They want to talk about the fun stuff. So background checks on private sales. I think we kind of already covered it, but there's no giving a gun to a granddaughter. You can't have a sister giving it to her brother, something like that.
You correct, but I wouldn't say it's universal background checks, because it doesn't have to go to a gun store and have an FFL do a 4473. There is that gun transaction portal where you log in, the buyer and the seller, and then you put the gun information and you hit submit, and you print out a receipt and each go your way. It's not even a background check per se. It's just the transfer and the registration of that transfer. Actually, I think it's, of all like gun regulation that I have to live with, that's probably the one that upsets me the least, because if you are like unsure if this guy, like in some states, if it's two guys meeting in a Walmart parking lot and all you got to do is verify that they have a driver's license or something, and you can just hand them a gun, there's the uneasiness of the seller, like, who am I giving this gun to? And in a lot of states, that there's really no way around that unless you meet at a gun store and you do a transfer through there and you pay a fee. If you want to be able to just kind of two people get together that may or may not know each other, but you both have your license to carry, now there's a mechanism in place to just kind of go through the steps and show that you transferred it to this guy. And there's no cost, no fee involved, but there's also no background check involved, which is good because you've already been through it in order to get the LTC. And if that person's LTC has been suspended or revoked, it will not allow the transaction to go forward. I will say this is probably one of the better thought out systems. Would I really like the ability to just hand my father or hand my friend that I know has an LTC and I don't have to worry about him a gun and not have to go through the paperwork? Yes, I definitely do believe that is the way it should be. But also, on the other hand, I don't mind for the transaction of someone who I don't know that could have a suspended or revoked transaction license and might be going to kill their wife. I mean, you can never think for all situations, but of all the gun control crap that I deal with, that's probably one of the least infringing ones that I would say are on me. But anyway.
I hear you. But that's the razor cut or the ice pick, because they give you so much other stuff that you're willing to be okay with that one because of its comparative, whatever, but it's really the registration and it's the
Yeah.
convenience of death, right? So yeah, that part's, I hear you, but we feel for you. So background checks on private sales are heinous, and that's one of the reasons. But like you say, they're not universal, and that's why um, they can get people to answer questions about it and use that all the time, right? So that's an interesting element there, and you can see that there's a lot of states that deal with this. I've heard people say that this is the biggest thing to fear. This is the biggest thing to be concerned with, and not necessarily the specifics of Massachusetts, but like in general, the universal background checks is like
Yeah.
had been the big one. However, it's a whole nother discussion probably, so I'm not going to get into it too much. But if you look at just 2022, the number of tactics they've used against gun owners, and just look at make a list with bullet points. I mean, one thing, background checks is hardly even on it, but it's wouldn't be alone. There's a lot of different strategies that they use. So assault weapons ban, you've had that since you mentioned that on the show plenty of times. You've had that in place since '94 when it went national,
Yep.
and every bit as restrictive as what we all experienced never disappeared, or was it even more so? Was it equal to what we had, or was it worse?
It was adopted exactly the language of the 94 assault weapons ban, and we just made it permanent statewide in 98. I think they saw the writing on the wall that it was gonna get sunsetted in 2004, so the state just preemptively made it, but they adopted the exact bill. I mean, there's no difference to it whatsoever. That's why the 2016 enforcement notice is so over the top and so egregious, because she's basically accusing all 50 state attorneys generals for getting it wrong for 10 years, um, as they, dealt with it. And she made it all right in 2016. But yeah.
Let me ask you real quick, because what's the population of Massachusetts? Do you know off the top of your head? The whole
I
state.
think it's around 7 or 8 million.
Oh,
If I'm
okay.
not, maybe it's
So
more than that. Let me see.
no, it got to
Uh,
be more than that. California's 40, if I remember right.
um, Good question.
So
Uh,
then restrictions on open carry. I see that at least my map says no open carry. So my question, if that's right, my question would be, is that something that's even been petitioned for, or with all the other things you got to deal with, is it like very last on a list, most people's lists?
um, Open carry is not technically illegal in Massachusetts. Um, I was right. It's about 7 million.
Okay, thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Um, so the,
So I
the state law does not differentiate between open or concealed as it relates to like our license to carry. That's all it says. It's our license to carry a firearm. Um, with that being said, it is very much frowned upon open carry, and you probably will be confronted by a law enforcement. Someone is probably going to call the police on you. And if somebody feels threatened, like because you looked at them funny or you didn't say hi or you didn't smile when you walked by, then they can say they felt threatened. And so you could be charged with disturbing the peace or simple assault or, um, you know, um, brandishing a firearm in an extreme case. So for that, all that reason, it's not worth it. Um, but technically, under the letter of the law, you have a right to open carry.
when people hunt in Massachusetts, do they typically bother to carry, or do you have, like out here we have mountain lions and like maybe a javelina you get between her and her baby or something? There might be a reason to open carry. Is open carrying while you're hunting even a thing in Massachusetts? Yep.
No, you're not allowed to even carry a pistol during most hunting seasons.
Okay.
So unless you're hunting, I said there's very few exceptions to that, and that is if you're hunting with a pistol for certain types of game where it's permitted. Like I know you can use a pistol for hunting raccoons or for coyote, but you can't use one for deer hunting. Or so if you're out in the field during deer hunting season and you're carrying a pistol, you're in serious violation of the game laws. So no one's really open carrying a pistol in Massachusetts, even in the woods.
Additional background checks. So I got you down as NICS only. So you're a good person to talk to, because as an FFL or as a gun shop owner, most gun shops have to deal with federal laws. Well, all gun shops have to deal with federal laws as part of your licensee, right? But then some states have additional stuff, and there's different levels of that. So is it true that Massachusetts is just the national NICS? You don't have some kind of state level police authorization or thing to deal with?
Yeah, that is technically true. It's funny because when you log into that gun transaction portal as an FFL, it's called the MERC system, Massachusetts Instant Check System, but it doesn't do any check. You're literally just registering the gun. So the only exception to that is if you put someone's license to carry number in and their PIN number, then it can flag it if it's been suspended, revoked, or if it's being renewed and they've issued the new license and they're in your gun store with the old license, it's not going to allow it to go through because there's a new license that's been issued. So it kind of does away with the old license. So there's a little bit of a mechanism to stop a purchase or stop a sale, if you will. But it's usually a temporary inconvenience to the person who's not, trying to buy a gun illegally. So there's no background check that happens. And that goes along the lines of the private transfer. Like, again, you're logging into that MERC system, but there's no background check actually taking place.
Is that, just to keep asking questions, is that something that they've attempted, or has that been, again, kind of left alone right now?
I think it's a bigger, I think they would love to be able to do it, but they don't have the resources or staff or infrastructure to actually do it. They're already overwhelmed with the whole licensing scheme that they have in place, and they can't keep up with just issuing licenses. Never mind, doing a background check on every purchase in this state. They'd never be able to do it. And so,
At least not with the current resources. And we got to be careful, because some of these people don't hate guns as much as they love the idea of giant bureaucracy and dependence on the state. So if they can see an avenue to create more, then they're going to do it just for that reason. And if it infringes on gun owners, great. But really what they want is big state, more employees, right?
yeah, I think there's a little bit of a practical level to it, though. And like when they made the changes to bring it in line with the New York State Pistol and Rifle Association V. Bruin case, they also were going to make the license only valid for 3 years instead of 5 or 6, depending on when your birthday is. And that was crazy. I'm like, they're going to double the amount of time we need to go for our license, and they already can't meet the law, which says they have to reply within 40 days of your application. And so they're going to do it now twice as much and be able to comply with the law? I don't think so. So that part fortunately fell off the final bill that got signed into law. So they didn't end up, and that was a good opportunity for them to say, hey, we could do this every 3 years. Shoot, we could do it every year. You know what I mean? They could make your license only valid for 1 year. And that would mean just seriously inconveniencing everybody. But at the end of the day, they were probably like, we don't want to have to hire and train just for this function. We're really not keeping up with the status quo. So let's just maintain the status quo. That's why I don't see them enacting some sort of background check system for every purchase in the state, especially because the license to carry is so comprehensive that I don't think they'll do that anytime soon. But you never know.
With that insight, it makes me think, because part of my projects are to create the background so that we all have a consistent awareness of where we've come from and how we got here and on whose shoulders we stand. and what their resources are, so that we know what we've got, right, potentially, and what we've had, because then we're all on a level to play the game. Right now, they've got us at a disadvantage because we don't all know the rules for sure. There aren't really rules, and we definitely don't know the players, and we don't know the playing field. Once we've got some of that established, we can get some creative minds to figuring out how to create systems and strategies and tactics, right? You get players that get some experience winning, and then it's a whole different story. Right now, we've got a bunch of people who understand that you can learn from losses, and some wins, but very few spectators who are cheering for massive wins, and we can get that situation into place. So when I think about, what I'm going to be doing after the resources are done, when we're starting talking about tactics, how to communicate, and all the stuff that's been accomplished in specifically the last few years, but in all the time towards this, what you're talking about there is having is accomplished with communication and awareness, and then we can take a lot of their stuff off the table. But anyway, as far as like hacking the system, how do we create systems that make it difficult for them? If we think about giving them an all-you-can-eat buffet and then letting, like a termite or something. I think some of these pest controls is you give them an all-you-can-eat buffet, they eat so much that they're ineffective and they don't last another generation. So maybe some ways we can give them all they want and then say, all you got to do is pay for it. All you got to do is pay for it, and then run around letting them, so some ways that we can spin them out, because they're doing a lot of this stuff knowing that we don't have our shit together, so that they can just throw some stuff at us, and they're not really paying attention to what the, price consequences are, like you say, number of employees and stuff like that. So it'd be interesting to see some of these people that do like the 3D printing and attack the conversation from different angles, with that, instead of just the 80%ers. Let's talk about 3D printing, or that recent buyback, that really changed the playing field on buybacks going into the future. It's $27,000 buyback or whatever. With that
Right.
kind of thinking, let's think about states like this where they have created infrastructures that they can't even pay for, and then hold them to it. Maybe there's a way to bankrupt them out of 2A. Anyway, I'm just going off on a tangent. I said I wasn't going to go on. So background check for ammunition purchase. Can I take a second and ask you to talk about delivery? That's pretty awesome. I heard a lot of gun shops doing a lot of things, but with all this stuff recently with shipping and stuff, you guys started taking on delivering. Tell us about that and how it's going.
Yeah, so there's no background check per se for purchase of ammunition. However, you cannot purchase ammunition in the state unless you have a license to carry or an FID card. So, and the statute or the law says that you must present the license at the time of purchase in hand. So it's not like you can just email in a copy of your license and we can keep it on file, and then we can just ship ammo to you via UPS or FedEx whenever you want us to. And this was driving me up a wall. I wanted to figure out a way around this one way or another, because it's ridiculous that we can't get ammo through the mail in Massachusetts. So it occurred to me one day that if we deliver it, I can now verify their license to carry or FID card in hand at the time of purchase. And so I'm like, shoot, we'll just become the Amazon.com of ammunition delivery in Massachusetts. And anyone who orders it from us out of state will just ship it common carrier, or however the heck, whatever the best way is to ship it to that state. And maybe we'll expand to surrounding states at some point if it catches on enough and we have enough of uh, a demand for it. And I'd love it if someday this turns into a fleet of vehicles on the road every day, you know, out delivering ammo. I know Target Sports USA is probably one of the biggest ammo companies online, and they do a great job. And they actually continually shipped into Massachusetts, even though they were issued a cease and desist letter from our Attorney General. The AG sent a letter saying you have to have a license to sell ammunition in this state, and you can't verify in hand at the time of sale whether or not this person is legal to own the ammo. So they were issued a cease and desist, which they did suspend deliveries to Mass for some time. And then they finally looked like, come and get us. If you're going to come and get us, come and get us. I didn't have that luxury because I did possess a license to sell ammunition in this state. So if I was shipping it all over the state, then they would just say, well, you don't like laws, so we're not going to reissue you the license. Um, Whereas they didn't have to worry about that because they didn't even have the license in the first place. So this puts us in a better place to give more options to the people of Massachusetts, and where it's really starting to catch on. It was kind of a slow rollout. We didn't like beat a drum and do it over the air like on the Howie Carr show or Grace Curley show or something like that at first. We just wanted to see how it would go. And our first delivery was literally like down the road. It was about 10 minutes away. So it was kind of funny. Like, all right, yeah, we'll do it. And then, but we've got some busy people in Boston or, north of Boston that are like, I don't have time to drive to the Cape or to a gun store. So I'm willing to pay whatever the shipping cost is to have us deliver it. And we came up with a formula that if they buy like a case quantity of ammo, it's basically free shipping. And we're hoping that we'll be able to map a logistics route throughout the state based on zip code or based on county or, whatever it is. And we'll eventually be able to, tell people we're in your area on Tuesdays or, Wednesdays or whatever. And ultimately, if it gets busy enough, we'll just put a couple trucks on the road and do it. So that would be, I know Arlos wants to be a part of the show, but that would be the best bet. And so far, so good. We've had a lot of fun with it. It's great sending the truck out on the road and getting some, good looks on the highway. It's fully lettered and fully wrapped vehicle, so it's
Oh, I
kind of
didn't think
neat.
about that. Yeah, but that's sort of like getting the word out right there.
Yep.
I think that's cool though. I don't know if any other stores are doing that. I'm not aware of any. And when we're talking about normalization and making change, we could wish for change and we can do the same old stuff for change, but stuff that actually is cutting new ground is worth chatting about and supporting. So that's awesome. And then of course we're talking free ammo, but or delivery of ammo. It's not free, I guess. Delivery of ammo, but anything from the shop. So if they needed a sight or something for the bow or whatever you might have there, it all adds up to the delivery, and now it might even be free shipping.
Yep.
It comes up. Yeah. 2A sanctuary states, has that ever even been a thing in Massachusetts, or is that a tough one?
Heck no.
Yeah. In
Yeah,
the face,
that one probably won't even come up
that's
anytime soon.
introduced yet. And these were efforts from states who probably felt a little anxious because they, when we're looking at 2022, you've got the NRA and stuff that's, faltering, you could say, like people losing confidence. They're getting mixed messaging on the effectiveness. And then the other organizations, can do what they can do, but they're the size they are and they have the goals that they've got. So what you end up with is a lot of people after 2013 and the grassroots, the successes that we've had, and with the failures that we've had, also the black eyes that people do not like getting, I think there's been a lot of interest in doing something. And one of those things is to express that you're not going to bring those laws here, making yourself a Second Amendment sanctuary state. And then when you think about that, that took a lot of effort and that took a lot of collaboration and then coordination to make these things happen. So I include them because while they may not be the only thing going on, like I said, there's a lot of stuff going on. It is an indication of where we're at in the momentum and stuff like that. Now, red flag laws, you've got them. Is that something that's just always been around, or did they get increased recently?
No, I think that was within the last 3 or 4 years.
That's
They passed the red flag law here in Mass.
You got a waiting period. There's no waiting period in Massachusetts. Is that right?
That's correct.
Wow.
Don't give them any ideas.
No, I want to say thanks. At least you got that going for you. So we're not completely ragging on you. And I did get the days here. So I'm going to start doing more informative maps. You can tell us a newer map. You do have may issue. Oh, I guess I have to change this one. They're all shall issue. So that's shall issue. But like you say, we kind of talked about at the beginning, they put in those suitability, or they increase their interest, or their, what do they call it? Like they just started increasing their, what am I trying to say? Like they're using suitability now more than before.
Right.
Right. To ration who's going to get a concealed carry. So number of suicides and whether the states backed the Mexican government with just some extra maps here to just kind of, again, show the involvement, but Massachusetts Attorney General, and that's the one who made your AR such a pain. That same Attorney General went with the other 17 states Attorney Generals to say, yeah, Mexico isn't the problem, and it's certainly not cartels or their influence. Let's blame American manufacturers of firearms. And yeah, so then we got you're in the first court. Anything to say there? I'm not a big court thing, but I did put this in here because we hear about it all the time, and so people can visually see these are where our courts are laid out. You're up there with Maine, Vermont, and Rhode Island.
Yep. Maine, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island.
Oh, yeah, sorry, New Hampshire.
Yeah, the one thing I would say about the courts is very few of our gun cases ever make it to the First Circuit Court of Appeals. That's because most of them get dismissed at the district court level, which is very unfortunate. And then they'll get appealed and usually dismissed at the First Circuit. So I don't see a lot of gun cases ever actually make it and have any type of ruling in the First Circuit Court.
And is that why Massachusetts is able to hang out there, because cases from Massachusetts don't get up like DC did and like Chicago did?
Right. And California gets a lot of them to the Ninth Circuit. And the one case that did make it all the way and ended up getting on the docket was Healy versus Warman. And that one was one of the 10 that were before the Supreme Court when they decided not to take up any gun cases a couple of years ago. So all that work for nothing. A lot of work and effort went into that. And then the Supreme Court just said, nah, we're not taking any cases. But I think there was a little bit of 4D chess going on in that. So
I think there's something to be said for discovering tactics, understanding our capabilities and our resolve, and then the appreciating getting people together for the fight, even if you don't win. So there's lots of stuff to learn from us from quote unquote failure. Red Summer of 1919, lots of race riots happened. When we had a summer of a lot of rioting and chaos in the country, a lot of people tend to think, oh, this is the end of democracy and end of civilization, fall of the Roman Empire. And there's a lot of people that dig into that. And this country, the system that we live through, is lived through the Civil War. It's lived through multiple world wars. And then it's lived through times of civil, societal unease and unrest. Red Summer is one of them. It looks like you had one in, I think that was not you, it was up in Rhode Island or something, but just putting that in there. It's one of our maps. Self-defense. So we got personal self-defense liability stuff. And some people will call that insurance. I don't like to, because it's really personal liability options. Let's see, according to this map, and trust me, this is difficult to keep track of, you don't have anything except one available?
No, we have US Law Shield and US CCA available for sure.
Okay.
I actually have both myself. So that is available.
I need to update this map for sure then. But because of the, I guess, just system of insurance laws, that prevents some states from, or prevents some of the liability providers to operate in some states or whatever.
Yeah.
Washington, it seems to be the worst of them. But you've only got 2 options. We know there's probably like 6 or something options. How old is this map? I thought I did this map.
I honestly don't even know what all the options are.
I did a thing earlier this year. There's like 6 current options.
Yeah.
And having 2 out of the 6 puts you in, not the freest, but at least it's better than, having none.
And there might be more than 2. I just don't know for sure.
I got, as far as gun shops, I've got 329 gun shops. I think that sounds right.
It sounds about right.
Now look at this, 3,957 FFLs. So when we talk FFLs, we're talking manufacturers, we're talking importers, but we're talking gun shops and pawn shops are all FFLs. Then you've got collectors, and I'm guessing that's a chunk of collectors, or do you think there's that many pawn shops? Because gun shops, I pulled out pawn shops and collectors and
Yeah,
manufacturers.
there's very few pawn shops in this entire state.
Oh,
Pawn
it's not.
shops are maybe not even a thing. I honestly can't think of one, but there might be some. And if there is, they probably don't sell guns. So
Oh,
I would
okay.
say most of those are type 3 FFLs or manufacturers. And there's still a remnant of kitchen table dealers, but they've had to do some serious gerrymandering. Like I know a guy who put an addition on his house, his garage, and he had to put like gun cases out in the garage, and he was number one on the street, so his garage was number 1A, and he had to get inspections by the local police and blah blah blah. It was just a big
Crazy amount of hurdles in order to
yeah,
complete.
yeah. And you have to show that you're in the business for a profit in a brick and mortar retail in an area that's zoned for retail. So he was fortunate his residence was on a street that was actually a commercial zoning, so he could get away with it. But and then there's people like a buddy of mine who has a commercial welding shop, so he was able to get his FFL, even though he's never going to open the doors and hang a shingle, but he can do some transfers for buddies or, buy what he wants on, he really did it just for the SOT. And, you know, he wanted to be able to play with machine guns and suppressors. So he's like us. He's a 7, type 7. He's a manufacturer. So, yeah.
Well, I think that I know that it sounds like, oh, you're not selling them, so therefore you're not in it, or maybe you're not building them, so therefore, questionable if you're not exporting. But those are just 3 things that the government decided in like the third, I guess in 68 or the 30s or 38, I guess, when they created FFLs. And that's all they had available to them. So I think now you can want to be something between a collector, like a museums hoard stuff, and they don't let you in, and they barely show their stuff online. So I think there's a real credit to the people that, I'm going to call it media, just because I don't know what else to call it, but people that acquire collections and then share those, and then have effectively interactive collections, because the people in the video might say, hey, do this or shoot that, or what is it? What is this like? Or change mags, or can I send you this and see if it works? And have like an actual experience that we're allowed to have. That's part of our experience with firearms, right? So somebody who gets an SOT in order to be able to do all that, I don't think there's a loophole in it. I think that the laws were written poorly back in the day to do something that was intending to do something else, and we're just trying hard to comply with that, to do things that have value or merit. Anyway, so again, I'm going to say thanks. We're about the 90-minute mark. Just checking in, playing host. Got a bunch of people jumping in. Luke is out there, one of the guys that helped create Every Second Matters back in the day.
Cool.
I was also going to open up Spreadshirt and mention that what we're looking at on the screen here is a bunch of maps that I did over the time. Thanks to our Patreons, we have time to spend on this kind of stuff. And I accumulated all those maps into a poster type of thing here and put that over on Spreadshirt. So our YouTube store thing down at the bottom, or wherever we're watching this, has a link to this as a poster if you want to get it. It's current as of earlier this year, I think, is when I put it together. And we've been going through with Toby from Cape Gunworks through the maps, using them as sort of a guide through the various things that how Massachusetts is involved in these different elements of gun regulation at various levels. So prohibiting gun registration, you don't have, you do sort of have a registration, as you mentioned. Like, you have to let them know when you're buying these and transferring them. Mm-hmm. They don't call it registration, and then they don't prohibit it, of course. So there's no mandatory minimum. I thought it's worth mentioning that there's only a couple of states with mandatory minimums, and they're pretty horrible. And you don't have those, or is this?
We actually do, as it relates to firearms.
Yeah, specifically firearms.
Yeah, we actually do. technically, anytime you commit a crime with a firearm, well, let's put it this way. If you're caught with a firearm and you're unlicensed, technically it's a mandatory minimum of 1 year in jail.
That sucks.
Yeah,
Because a lot of times they're for possession like that, and often it's because of ignorance of the law, or again trying to defend yourself in a bad neighborhood or something. And it's kind of what the whole thing is about. So that's frustrating, and that creates people that then they say, oh, there's there's lawbreakers with guns. Well, yeah, because people are minding their business, and anyway, so the mandatory minimum would be frustrating.
there's people that come in the shop and be like, I've had my father's shotgun in the back of the closet for 30 years since he died. What am I supposed to do with that? Like, am I okay? I'm like, no, dude, you're not okay. You had 180 days when he died to get licensed, and whatever. And he's like, oh, I better get a license then. Yeah, you should probably do that, because he's technically in. Now, in the home, if you never take it out of the home, I don't think they could ever get charges like that to stick. But as soon as you took it out of the home,
to prove a point, or they're for whatever reason, they don't like look at your face or whatever, they could use you as a test case, right?
Right.
That sucks. I didn't think to ask that one, and I should probably put something in here to focus on inheritance, and I don't really have anything in here for moving either. Like, I didn't think about that, but there's quite a bit of people moving, I'm sure. State firearms. Only 10 states have a state firearm, so it's not surprising that you don't, or I guess 9 states or something. But I would ask, if there was going to be a state firearm for Massachusetts, what do you think it would be, or what would you choose?
That's a great question. I think I know what the politicians would choose, and it would be like a long rifle. But if it were me and I got to choose, I would definitely pick a gun that was manufactured here by either Smith and Wesson, or Savage, or go back in the day, Springfield Armory. So, boy, that'd be a tough one. But I don't know, maybe like the registered Magnum or something. Like a good iconic wheel gun or something like that.
Like a Smith and Wesson.
Yeah.
I'd be down for that. And maybe, do you think that would lure them back? Would they come back in force if they were appreciated at that level?
No.
Recently, Smith and Wesson was under attack by your attorney general, if I understand, for not being nicer to whoever the government scrutiny was it the Senate that brought all the gun manufacturers in and was yelling at them and expected them to say how much we need the ATF and stuff. And Smith and Wesson never showed up, wrote that awesome letter, but that was also to say goodbye, right? Like, you're leaving, you're making this heinous. We're moving our state or our stuff, a chunk of our stuff, not everything, to Tennessee.
I don't think that was the tipping point. The tipping point was the state rep who represents Springfield, Mass, filed legislation that would ban the manufacture of any gun in the state that could not be sold in this state.
Oh, okay.
And so Smith and Wesson's like, that's 50% of our lineup.
What are we supposed to do?
Yeah. Like, are you serious?
Seeing the writing on the wall, and they're like, we wouldn't be in business if we didn't make a preemptive move, right?
Right. Now, they probably knew that wouldn't pass, but how can you take a chance when you're, have 2,500 employees and you're a major supplier of firearms to the world, and you also get the sentiment behind it, and it's, we don't want you here. That's what that is.
And we've taken a step in this direction just because we couldn't do everything, follow through. We've made our tendency, what do they call that? They've shown their motives. Yeah. We got a couple more to talk about, so it'll probably be right around 2 hours. Appreciate again your time in the middle of the evening for you in Massachusetts. We got the DC project rep. So the Massachusetts DC project rep? Do they
Yep,
know?
we definitely do. I know a couple of the girls that go down every year. One of them is the girlfriend of our holster manufacturer that is one of the bigger lines of holsters we sell here, a company called 508 Holsters. I actually have one on right now. I won't take that one out, but I might have one of their other ones kicking around. But yeah, this girl, Lakeisha Robbins, she's one of the DC project girls that goes down. And I know there's 2 or 3 girls. We actually hosted a mass women's gun owners event at our shop in our range once, and a bunch of them were DC project girls. So
Right on.
yeah.
And they were just in DC, so we're glad to have them represented in our maps here. And then riding shotgun with Charlie, I got a map for him because he's doing awesome stuff going around and interviewing mostly Second Amendment advocates, but also people from the industry and doing stuff in guns in the gun community. But yeah, well, I should put Massachusetts on here. My map is old. So when he did the drive with you, was that at the shop or was that someplace else?
Yeah, he came to teach I think he was teaching one of the Utah non-resident classes for us one Sunday, and I just met him here, and we did the loop around town. And I've known Charlie for years. We've done a lot of training together. We've done probably 4 or 5 different classes together. I've also taken him and hosted his class a lot, the Utah non-resident. He's probably done 30 or 40 classes for me, maybe more than that over the past 7, 8 years. We traveled together to the vineyard, did one on the road there. We did them on Nantucket. So yeah, he's a good guy. We've done a lot together. And so I finally made the big time and got in the stagecoach and got to do the ride with him.
Yeah, it's very cool. And like I say, that worked out perfect because it was about a week or something after I had started listening to the show on the radio here in Tucson. So I'm glad I was able to find the show and the work you're doing with like an outreach and normalization with that, but also just awareness and opportunity for people in Massachusetts who have to deal with such complicated situations to make it through, and then know that they're not alone. And then hopefully understand through you do it pretty professionally and calmly so that you don't get them all riled up and worried about every answer. And when it's definitely a tendency often of people who are talking political issues, or guns in general.
Hmm.
So then the last one in the map that I think we're going to hit, because I might have missed a couple, but I can't keep track, is state Second Amendment. So I'm going to flip over to my screen here for a bit and chat about another thing, just because I need to talk about stuff I do more often. One of the projects we did is Minuteman University, and we took some of the info from Minuteman University and put it into this project, the 50 States at 2A. So it's one state per page. And go to Massachusetts, and up at the top we have the state Second Amendment. So evidently with everything that's going on there, you do have a state constitution. Most states do. There's just a couple of states that have no affirmed right to bear arms, but Massachusetts does. From what I read here, it says the people have a right to keep and bear arms for common defense, and as in time of peace armies are dangerous to liberty, they ought not to be maintained without the consent of the legislature, and the military power shall always be in an exact subordination to the civil authority and be governed by it. And that's your Declaration of Rights, Article 17. So it's not necessarily as explicit as some states that say, here's your right to carry, or here's we're going to hands off. But like I say, there are a couple of states that don't even have it. They don't even mention it. You got any position on it or any thoughts on it?
I probably should know that, but I don't. So that's a little homework assignment for me, that I should read our state's, constitution. I know it from what I do know about it is it does go kind of hand in hand with our U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. So with just a little bit different language. But I've heard people who are trying to justify the um, abolition of some of our strict gun laws here in Mass use our own Constitution as fodder or ammo, I should say, uh, for that purpose. So, I should brush up on it and um, look it up for sure, especially if it shows how tyrannical our current government is, being. So that's a that's a great little book. I'd love to get a copy of that.
Yeah,
And
I'll send you a copy. Let's see. So that's like I said, that was an attempt to go through the map. I'll probably figure out a way to maybe put that in a list so I don't have to zoom all over the place and make everybody seasick looking at it. But I think that actually worked as a way to kind of guide through a bunch of different topics from different angles. So I appreciate you being willing to kind of experiment there.
yeah,
And hopefully it was still useful. The problem is when you do something that's in depth, it becomes long, and now, it's not consumable. It's difficult for somebody to want to sit there and listen to 2 hours. My projects are typically longer, so I end up with an audience that's downloading and listening to it as a podcast, or I mean, as an audio file, right in their earphones or something, or at work, or while they're jogging or something, maybe in the car. But then the long format gives us time to actually thrash stuff out, right, and have conversation. And then the people that are here can have a conversation in the side chat as you're listening to this. If you're listening to this in the future, if you jump over to YouTube, you can see some of the back and forth that went on throughout the different questions that we were and topics that we were talking about. As I kind of skim through the comments here as we wrap up, Toby, is there anything that we like skimmed over or brushed past that you wanted to hit that I
there was one that I think got asked a couple of times about why can't we buy Glocks in Massachusetts, and that one is particularly ridiculous. We have something called a mass approved weapons roster. So it's similar to California, um, where if a gun is going to be sold in the state, it had to have been sent to an independent testing lab. I think every manufacturer has to pay a fee of like 10 grand and send 5 copies of the same gun to this lab to be destroyed. They don't get the guns back when they're done, and they drop them, light them on fire, burn them, melt them, whip them across the room, fire 100 rounds consecutively through them, and a bunch of other stuff. And if they don't pass the test, then they can't be sold. If they do pass the test, they can be added to the mass approved weapons roster. But wait, there's more. And that doesn't mean we can necessarily sell it. It also has to meet the definition of the Attorney General's regulations. The Attorney General has this list of requirements of what a gun needs to have in order to be sold in Massachusetts. So if the grip is small enough that a child could reach the trigger and press it, then it has to have a thumb safety or a 10.5-pound trigger pull. If and there's other stuff. It has to have a loaded chamber indicator. It has to have, in some cases, not all, a magazine disconnect. So there's all these different nuances, and it's almost impossible. I've been at this for 8 years, and I can't tell you right down the line all the things on the list and where it applies and where it doesn't, because I just don't know. In fact, when I first became a dealer, I called the state and said, "Can you send me the list of guns that are approved by the Attorney General's office?" They laughed at me on the phone. Literally, I'm not making that up. And I'm like, "What's so funny?" They go, "Oh, there's no list." And I said, "Well, how do I know what guns to sell?" And they said, "Oh, well, the manufacturers know." I'm like, "So I got to call every manufacturer and see if this gun and this gun and this." They said, "Basically, you can use the mass approved weapons roster as a guide. And basically, we just don't want Glocks sold." And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So if it's on the list, generally speaking, we can sell it with the exception of Glock. And the reason we can't sell Glock is because up until the 5th generation, the extractor was not considered a loaded chamber indicator. Back in 98, when they introduced the EOPS list, the mass approved weapons list, Glock sent all their guns, got them tested, got them approved, and started selling them in the state. And then uh, Tom Riley, our attorney general at the time, was like, wait, we don't like Glock. Glock's the most popular gun in the country. We got to figure out a way. Oh, they don't say anywhere in the book that it has a loaded chamber indicator. So therefore, can't buy a Glock. And so they made Glock issue a mandatory buyback to all the ones that were sold in the state at full retail value. Now, I don't know if Glock stepped up to the plate and just did that, or if the state was saying, you better do that. I really don't know. But in any case, they made a good effort to contact everybody and say, hey, I'll buy your gun back at full retail value. Meanwhile, the state sent letters to everybody and said, guys, you can't own this gun because it's unsafe. It doesn't have important safety features on the gun, built into the gun. So we recommend you return it right away to the local gun store so that you and your family will be safe. And they will give you a full refund. And make sure you don't buy another one because they're unsafe, right? Conversely, they made police departments and law enforcement officials exempt from the Attorney General's regulations because 65% of all police departments were using Glocks. And they can't say, well, the gun is unsafe, but we want our police officers to carry unsafe guns. So they basically just made them exempt from the whole Attorney General's regulations. So now cops can buy Glocks, law enforcement agencies can buy Glocks and issue them to their officers, but a regular person in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts cannot go into a gun store and purchase a late model new manufactured Glock. Only Gen 2 or 2.5. The cutoff was in 98. And in order to, buy a Glock. So the irony of it all is it's unsafe for me to own, but my police officers can run around with it. And Freedom of Information Act has uncovered that all of the internal memos and emails and everything going back and forth by Scott Harshbarger, Tom Riley, and all the people involved with this was that this has nothing to do with keeping people actually safe. It was another roadblock or an obstacle to making it harder to buy the most popular gun in America at the time, or most popular handgun in America, which is the Glock, and just make it if they felt that they could reduce gun ownership by banning the most popular gun, and they did it through something like the Consumer Protection Act. And now Glock has already come out with the Gen 5 Glock, and they do call the extractor the loaded chamber indicator, but they've never sent the affidavit back to the Attorney General saying it now meets your requirements, because I think they've been once bitten, twice shy. I've called Glock and said, guys, just send them an affidavit saying it now meets the Attorney General's regulations and we're good to go, because now all of a sudden you have a loaded chamber indicator. And they're like, yeah, we're probably not going to do that. So it's unfortunate, but that leaves us at this impasse where now you got to get very creative. And like I said, Massachusetts doesn't recognize a frame of a gun as a firearm. So we can do a transfer of a Glock frame, and then you can build it all out and register it on the portal yourself, because there's no law that says you can't own a Glock. There's only laws that say me as the licensed gun shop, I can't sell the Glock. So as ridiculous as all that is, it shows the true evil intent of our politicians and our regulators to just make it harder and harder for you to exercise your right to keep and bear arms.
That's awesome descriptions. Hopefully somebody will take that last couple of bits out of it. Consider yourself welcome to grab that bit and then make a video about that, because that's a big nuance. There's a lot of nuance in what you just talked about there. I'm going to say it's your perspective there is like the wake of that initial, it sounds like from 1998, pursuit of demonizing the Glock specifically for whatever reasons, and then having that agenda or goal, like let's get rid of the Glocks. Now, how are we going to do it according to the rules we got set in front of us? This is the antis. and they figure out, like you said, the loaded chamber indicator. It sounds awesome. Loaded chamber indicator. It sounds a little bit technical, but you can still figure out what's going on. And it sounds like if you didn't have it, you wouldn't know if the gun's loaded. Like a non-gun person, it's a perfect part to be worried about, right? Stupid name for it, just a technical name that we thought about. And now, like you say, that angle, that vector is ideal because now they can campaign on it. They can use it and demonize it, marginalize gun owners. They don't want this safety piece, like you said, the way you said it, that they're going to campaign that it's unsafe gun now. And then I was just going to say, there's that I'm just describing what you described there, but there's okay, so that's the boat going by. The wake of that is you got people in Massachusetts who can't buy a Glock. So some people are just not going to have that option. They're not going to go through whatever. It sounds like there is ways to get Glocks, or there has been ways to get a Glock or acquire a Glock, just not the typical go to the gun shop and buy it way. So in that case, in the absence of it, somebody's going to buy some other brand and just become loyal or like that brand, have no reason to shoot the other one. If their friends don't have it, why would they become an advocate of some brand they don't even own, right? So you could see a bunch of people there that just don't like Glocks because they have no interest in them. Then there's people who are going to say Glock should be fighting to be here. And since they're not, I'll never buy a Glock. So now I hate Glocks because of that. So you got people that don't care and you got people that hate them. Now they're out in the forums having discussions. Is there anything about a Glock that had anything to do with this? No, some decision Glock made a long time ago. But that's something that I see in the community is we've got, opinions and we've got discussions and stuff, and where are they formed? Nobody's wrong here. I'm just saying, like, that's where a lot of times these things come from, is people's attitudes are formed by their availability and their experience with it. And if they have neither, then that can create problems. And as you described that whole thing, I kind of remembered as you're talking about that, as I could imagine Glock being, or just having the contrary opinion or attitude to just say, no, if they wouldn't accept our guns before, we're not going to lift a finger to do it. You change your laws. And there's people that would say, don't sell to the states that have infringements. Make those people pay. That's the only way to get them to move. So you're going to get that whole level of people that are like, now I champion Glocks because they won't sell them in Massachusetts. And now think of that rift. So I'm not saying that anyone was creating any of this, but that's kind of the stuff that happens. And when you hear some of these debates and these conversations, think about if they've ever even shot the thing and what their real motivations, I guess, were from. And when you hear people kind of mock it and turn it into a joke, it becomes marginalized, just like gun owners get marginalized. So I just thought this, since we're 2 hours in, I'm guessing only activists are listening at this point, or people that are really dedicated to this stuff. But just think of that side of it. Too often we don't pay attention to the trifle stuff, and it's the slight differences or the slight effects or the slight changes in the trifle stuff that is the big seed changes, right? So sometimes cutting things off at the root are worth it.
And I think along those lines, the best way for gun manufacturers to actually have some impact in those areas is just the opposite of what Glock did. Like if Glock said, I'm no longer going to test my guns and sell them to mass because I can't sell to everybody. No, they still tested their guns just to sell to the law enforcement community, which makes it worse, if you ask me, because I would have more respect for a state that just chooses, a company that just chooses not to deal with Massachusetts. However, I would have the utmost respect for a company that would say, hey, if a civilian can't buy my gun in your state, then neither can you. We will not sell to a government agency. We will not sell to a state agency. And we will not sell to any government agency in that state. And that would be a way to actually manifest serious change. Because if you get 4 or 5 manufacturers that stand together and do that, then I think, but again, at the end of the day, they're making business decisions. They owe it to their shareholders and their employees and their families and themselves to make sure the business is in the healthiest position it can be. But at some point, I would love to see some hardline changes made. Then you got companies like Palmetto State Armory, which I personally, as a gun dealer, cannot order an upper receiver from them. I can't order a muzzle brake. I can't order anything from that company. They will not ship to Massachusetts, whether you're a gun dealer, whether you're a government agency, whether you're a person. or not. They don't even care if it's a regulated item or not. They just have cut off Massachusetts altogether, which that's ridiculous. I mean, as far as the gun community is concerned, that's not helping the cause to say, hey, screw you, Massachusetts, because you guys keep voting in the wrong guys. We're not going to deal with you. It's not our fault. You know what I mean? The gun owners here that are trying to do the right thing and trying to carry and toe the line. And we already have a anti-gun crowd to fight. Now we got to go and fight the gun crowd too. Like, this is ridiculous. I have a lot more respect for the people who do continually deal with Massachusetts and California and do business with us, and in spite of our horrible situations. But I think that, I would love to see companies rise up and say, hey, a Hornady or a Federal or a big manufacturer say, yeah, we can't sell you any ammo anymore. Sorry, guys, because you don't let the citizens of your state own commonly owned and used firearms. Never going to happen, but it's fun to dream and think about it. But that would certainly I think it would move the needle if
Well,
states.
it's shown that there's history to that. So I'm so glad you brought that up. That's a great point. When you talk about holding the whole state accountable, saying, okay, you're not going to let the citizens or the regular people own them, but you are okay with the police. We're not going to sell them to the police. Taking that stand is something that, like you said, if a couple of state companies did it, it would severely hinder the state's choices, right? And then they get pressure from within to be like, hey, what are you doing? And to have to realize that they're making up a fake line in the sand to get all upset about. So there's a potential for some leverage there. But we've seen where that's been successful, where companies have done it. Barrett has done it, and people have got behind that. And then as far as it being useful over time, like you say, it's a company decision. It is what they've made. What most companies have made as decisions, but not all companies. But as far as, I'm just going to take a second to say, as far as the viewers, the consumers of content, the people that watch, we have the ability, and we have in the past changed the industry dramatically. And I always use SHOT Show as the quick example, or as an example. I'll quickly say, when I started going to SHOT Show in 2005, it was still film cameras. Having a digital camera was a big deal. And then I could put my digital pictures on the internet. That really freaked people out in 2005. And it was a different time, a different internet. Over time, people got more accustomed to pictures at SHOT Show. They got more accustomed to video eventually, and now streaming. And now they're very accustomed to people walking up and they leave a portion of their booth, a very expensive portion of their booth, for people to walk up with their phones and take selfies, which might seem frivolous, but it didn't just happen. That happened without, no one sat down and said, in 2022, there's going to be places for selfies at a booth, because no one knew what that was and no one would have suggested it. But it got here slowly because people wanted video from SHOT Show. They wanted pictures from SHOT Show. They wanted pictures from SHOT Show quicker. And when people supply that need, it shows what's available and what's possible, and then somebody takes the challenge even further. So I like it when you bring that up instead of just glossing over. I thought it was worth taking that time, because as consumers, we can congratulate and appreciate the companies that do take stands, and give them, even if it's just sharing their content, if you can't purchase their stuff, but making the decision to purchase their stuff. And then likewise, when you don't purchase stuff, let people know, hey, there's a reason why I made a decision to buy your competitor's stuff this week. And it's because of the stand you took in Massachusetts. Stuff like that. Make it effective if you're going to boycott or, make a purchase decision for a reason.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I'd love to see more of that. I think it could, and frankly, at some point.
Well, what happens? Does it come out of nowhere? Does it come as a pushback? So I think we're in an opportunity time for that. There's a lot of potential for people to kind of have that ambition and make a deliberate effort. When people are apathetic in the times when there's no pressure against gun owners or gun ownership, nobody wants to do it. Right now, Massachusetts, you don't realize it as much probably, but the whole country's under pressure, or at least the perception of pressure, where you probably had it more consistently all the time. But when you get everybody riled up, as I kind of mentioned when we were kind of going through some of those things earlier, there's people get frustrated and they want to do something, like the 2A sanctuary stuff. That was an attempt to use some of their energy towards something constructive. So anyway, so yeah, I think there's potential for this, even though there hasn't been a lot of precedent for it.
Yeah, I think it could certainly move the needle and make a difference. I even most of the police officers I know or cops I know, law enforcement agencies or officials, they all kind of roll their eyes at what we are going through and say, yeah, this is ridiculous, but we'll see how it see how it goes. If you want me to chime in on those last two, I will.
Yeah, the one you already addressed, I just threw it up there, but I think we already hit that one. This one here, though, from John is, it's always wondered about percussion revolvers and a workaround for possession or carry. And I imagine this was from back when we were talking open carry or
Yeah.
something, but yeah.
It's an interesting concept. It doesn't work though. You can actually purchase a percussion revolver without any type of license in Massachusetts. You don't need to have a license to buy it. You do need to have a license to buy the shot or the powder or the cap. And if you load it, you're in possession of a firearm. So you have to be licensed in order to have it loaded. So it's not a workaround, unfortunately. Just recently, I think it was 6 or 8 months ago, a guy got charged with illegal possession of a firearm. He was caught with a loaded cap and ball pistol in his pants or whatever in a drug deal gone bad or something. But they did charge him with illegal possession of a firearm. So once it's loaded with a cap and ball and powder, you're a gangbanger.
And it's one of those things where the government says it has to be XYZ to be a firearm. And so air guns, for example, BB guns don't fall into that definition, but there are states where expanding gases is the definition. So
Mm.
there can be a variety of definitions. I can't find it. I think I killed so I can't highlight it, but G23 had asked if you transfer to other FFLs out of state.
Yeah, all the time. Do it all the time. And we get tons of transfers in this state from other FFLs, but yeah, we do a lot of business with other gun shops.
Since he's asking, I'll answer it, but I'll also let you answer if you want. But my favorite YouTuber is the YouTubers that use the internet and YouTube specifically creatively and to create community. Uh, my favorite YouTubers have always been the people that look outside the box and use this thing as a tool for a bigger picture and a bigger goal. And there's lots of them. So it's a big group and it changes. Unfortunately, they don't all stick around. They're not able to, but it's a group of people and there's a bunch of them. Check out our subscription list. We make our subscription list public.
Hmm.
Do you have a favorite YouTuber?
Well, it would have to fall into a couple of different categories for me. But if it's sheer entertainment value, I just love Jerry Michalik. How can you not love Uncle Jerry? He's just the type of guy you want to go shoot with. And I like watching his stuff. I like his style. I like his approach. He's just a fun, entertaining guy to watch. Not to mention just amazing how amazing he is at shooting. But if it's more of a actual informational, like get the word out, call to action, Jared Yanis is one of the best in the business, and I like how his videos are short. I'm a guy who can't really get in the weeds on a 2 hour long video or an hour long video, even though I do them. I just my time is so limited that I don't have time to really get into the weeds on stuff. I like the bullet point approach, and then I can go, oh, that's something I need to look into further and go a deeper dive on. But I get the kind of up to date stuff by Jared from Guns and Gadgets, and it's not really a entertainment value. I wouldn't, I don't say that as an insult to him. It's more of an informational, and I think he has the right amount of time and you know uh, associated with that. But
And
um,
pace also. It's not like, let me just tell you something. Let me just tell you something. It's like, valid stuff of use and
yeah,
updates. It's not, here's something just because it's 2 o'clock on a Tuesday.
right. Yeah, no, and he's got his finger on the pulse of what's going on. I use him a lot of my information I give out. But there's a lot of fun channels out there that are just fun and entertaining. Um, and I agree with you. G-Webs, that we should have some sort of bigger picture in mind. Like blowing stuff up all the time isn't necessarily going to bring the anti-gunner to the table for a good, valid conversation that might help move the needle in one direction or the other. But on the other hand, it's an outlet for gun people to have some sort of vicarious uh, outlet where they can see. We all want to go shoot machine guns, and I'd love to shoot a, you know, Gatling gun one day, and I may or may not be able to, but it's fun to be able to watch people do it, and live kind of vicariously through the moment and see it happen. So I'm not all down on people who just fire for effect, but um, I do like the shows that have a good combination of uh, entertainment value, information, and do it in a way that my ADD doesn't kick in, and I have to go do something else. Most YouTube videos I'm watching at 2x or 1.5 times speed anyway, just to get the information, absorb it, unless there's some funny aspect of it, or a really fast shooting thing. Jerry Mitchell, I don't think you could watch on 2x speed. He's already shooting so fast as it is. But anyway,
Uh, okay, correct. That's a great answer and good tip there to listen to stuff at more than normal speed. There's tools in the YouTube player that let you increase the speed that you play back, and you can definitely spend less time or listen to more. And
I think you absorb more, actually. There's studies that show you do.
really,
It's kind of like
great
speed
to get the
readers.
information. And if somebody's like, we're just talking and having, spaces in our conversation here that are natural, you're going to do the same thing. Your mind's going to wander, right? So when it comes in faster, you're absorbing it faster.
Yeah. And
Uh,
should I answer this one?
Yeah. If you're going to do away with any 2A law, what would it be and why from G23?
Specific to Massachusetts or any 2A law?
Let's assume a specific to Massachusetts. That's what we're talking about.
All right. Specific to Massachusetts, the first thing to go would be the assault weapons ban.
Is that the most heinous? Is it a linchpin or keystone or whatever? Like, does it make others topple?
No, it doesn't. That's kind of the problem with me saying that, but it's only enforced in two. It's not even enforced, but in theory, it's enforced in two ways: AK-47s and AR-15s. Any type of variant about that is no-go zone in the state from now on, until it's challenged. But you can kind of get around the high capacity magazine ban because of pre-ban availability. It does limit you to what guns you can and can't have. The mass approved weapons roster would be the close second. It might even jump in front of the assault weapons ban. I think we should be able to buy whatever gun we want. But at the end of the day, I think the fight is the AR-15. No one's going to die on a battlefield to be able to sell Taurus revolvers, right? And that is a situation. I can't sell Taurus revolvers, but I don't feel the same about the Taurus revolver as I do about the AR-15 or the AK-47 or any semi-automatic quote unquote assault weapon, or modern sporting weapon, whatever you want to call them. I think that really is the fundamental problem with all gun control, and that is this gun in your hand is a ticking time bomb. You are a felon in waiting. You are a bad person for even wanting to own one. And if you own one, you don't need it in the first place. And number two, why would you want it? Because it's a weapon of war, it's a weapon of mass destruction, and blah, blah, blah. And all the while dismissing the very need and reason for owning said weapon, which is to keep tyranny in check and everything else that goes along with that. But bullet point, it's to keep you, the government, from becoming a tyrannical government that we need to overthrow again, like we did 250 years ago. So for that reason, I would do away with the assault weapons ban. which most of the country's not even living with one. So it's kind of like, you know, one of those things that will probably work its way through the court system anyway. But that's the reason why I would do away with that first and foremost. Um, I think it's America's rifle, and I think it's one of the most versatile rifles on the planet. And the reason they don't want me to have it is the exact reason I want to have it. So that's my answer on that.
And it was a reactionary it was removed as a reaction and not through some like study or insight or awareness, right? It was done as a let's do something because of whatever. So I think there's a consequence if that you're once it's removed, that any amount of time on the clock becomes precedent that it was not necessary because people aren't violent. That whole like if we were if we were going to be violent, it wouldn't be reliant on the AR-15. You'd know it. That whole like it's 450 million guns. You'd know it type of mentality. So, but the same thing, like there's the same thing with braces. There's so many AR pistols out there. How can they say they're dangerous?
Right.
So once that law is removed, it'll allow people in Massachusetts to live comfortably with AR-15s and AKs again, and then they'll figure out, oh, that was an unnecessary law. Maybe some of these others are unnecessary too. At least that's what I like to think.
Yeah. And the irony of it is it's not doing anything because we don't like to be told no. Like we got into the Glock discussion. So most diehard gun owners find a way to get a Glock in the state of Massachusetts. Same thing with the AR-15 or the AK-47. We're now looking at alternatives to those guns that do the exact same thing. The Robinson Armament XCRL, the CZ Bren 2, the Tavor, the Ruger Mini 13, Mini 14, or Mini 30. The what's another one we sell a lot of? I even go so far as to sell the SIG MPX and the MCX, which some dealers in this state won't sell the MCX. Number one, because they're not a manufacturer, so they can't change them around to meet the assault weapons ban definition. But on the other hand, it is a total design difference from an AR-15, and it doesn't have a buffer tube, doesn't have the same bolt carry, doesn't have interchangeable parts, etc. So therefore, it doesn't meet the definition of assault weapon under the state definition. So therefore, I sell it like crazy, as many as I can possibly get in. And so, what are we really doing other than infringing upon someone's rights to own an AR-15? Because there's a gun that does, I mean, the ergonomics of the gun are identical. The safety's in the same spot, the mag release is in the same spot, the bolt catch is in the same spot, the stock comes up in the same spot. And so we're really just making it harder for you to exercise. So now I can't buy the $600 AR-15, but I can buy the $2,200 MCX. It gets back to the old England where it's a rich man's thing. And pre-bans are $3,000. A $650 AR-15, but it was made prior to 94, is now $3,000 in the state. It's ridiculous. It's just taking people's money and infringing upon something that they're going to be able to get anyway in some other form, and it's just a infringement. So I'd love to see that go away.
I can't help but ask then, I mean, that's awareness. To me, I think of that as awareness. Once people understand some of the ways that you've explained it, either through memes or through news, there was recently one with CNN that everybody's been reposting where CNN went to a class that was hosted, was it in California? And, it's a bunch of different gun owners there shooting for the first time. And the CNN reporter was like, aren't you scared? And then at the end, everybody seemed to, it was like a bunch of ladies that were, I think they were like old friends, and one of them had been an instructor. So she said, hey, for an outing, let's all go, shoot, basically an orientation to firearms. And the CNN reporter seemed surprised, right? And everybody's talking about that. Do you think that that type of thing happening, as it happens more often, will change the minds of the voters of Massachusetts? Or do you think these are different challenges or different solutions to this challenge?
I think that can definitely win the hearts and minds of people one at a time. By all
How
means.
much of the concept, though, of like people understanding that gun owners are just different kind of hobbyists, and that your concern is been manipulated and it's classist or racist, or it's from unquestioned tradition and not from valid science or whatever you want to see.
Yeah, when we had our grand opening here at the new range, when we opened this building in 2017, I tried to get Howie Carr to do a live appearance, but he was unavailable. He was on vacation, and I got a guy who used to be his producer. He goes by the title Virgin Boy. He's a big talk radio host out here, and he came down and was kind of like the celebrity, at the grand opening, because he had a big voice and he talked about it on the air leading up to we were trying to make a big splash. But he wasn't a gun owner, and he came in and he was blown away. He's like, I've always wondered what gun culture looked like. I've always wondered what gun owners look like. And I kind of expected, the hairy knuckle dragon, Neanderthals to come walk in and, with their Dixie flags and whatever, you name it, like whatever the stereotype that was in his mind. He goes, I'm seeing families with kids. Like, it's almost hard to walk around here. There's so many strollers in this place. And he goes, he was just standing back, watching and observing, the gun owners of Massachusetts walking around, having a good time. Never once did anyone feel threatened or scared or nervous or, uncomfortable. And everyone's holding guns and looking at them and, bearing in mind where the muzzles of the guns are and where their finger is on the trigger. And he was just blown away by that. And I think that's like what that reporter experienced. And, I think that's huge at moving the needle in big quantum leaps, when people are exposed and see, hey, wow, yeah, there's really nothing to be worried about. These people are probably less likely to commit a crime than non-gun owners. So anyway.
Yeah, especially when they do the math or the actual research, because CCW carriers or holders are often way more, well, the most law-abiding and it's called in the society. We've been going for 2.5 hours. I'm sure you've been getting calls and urgency or people that want
that signal.
Yeah, so I do appreciate it, but it was fun to chat. And again, hopefully this was useful for people that are looking for information specifically on this or how to have conversations on this. Toby's definitely approachable. He does a segment with Grace Curley every Tuesday. You can listen to that. Encourage you to call in, be part of that. You can do that with a telephone. You can do that with the internet, literally as multimedia as you can get. Then you do your own show recording on Wednesdays. People can participate in that as well. And then, well, you've got the actual gun shop. So with all that help, anything else you want to take as an elevator speech on the way out of here? And then we'll wrap it up and maybe chat a little bit off here.
No, it's if you want to call into our live show, you can always call 508-444-2120. You can ask a question, leave a message, even send a text if you want. If I didn't get to one of your questions in the chat and you want me to answer it on the air, I'm happy to do that. And you can always listen to it as a podcast if you go to capegunworks.com or wherever you find your podcast. Rapid Fire is in its 4th season, and we go about 6 months tranches as our seasons. And so we're in our 4th season, going about a little over 2 years now of shows. So there's a lot of good content, a lot of good guests. And we call it Rapid Fire. It's an hour long. There is a bonus hour afterwards. So we do go for 2 hours, but the main show is the first hour. I'd love to start doing the second hour as more of a long format. But we'll see how it goes. And but yeah, thanks for having me, and I appreciate all the exposure you've given me over the past few months that we've got to know each other, and it's great. I appreciate it. You pushing the name out there and pushing our content out there all the time is very helpful, and I really appreciate that.
Right on. Well, I'm going to bounce it right over to our Patreons, people that subscribe to what we do. I don't have a bunch of other things going on, so the Patreons basically buy us a cup of coffee, maybe buy us lunch once a month. That accumulates, and that gets, makes it possible for us to do what we do. we're going to wrap it up. Again, anybody that wants to grab stuff, you can go to Cape Gunworks. We'll drop the link to the store, purchase stuff from the store. That's a way to support what they're doing and everything that gets done from Massachusetts or in Massachusetts. If you like to support the show specifically, grab one of those posters. I think they're $20, 25, $23. And I think we make $5 or $10 out of that. And I forget what the shipping is and stuff on it, but appreciate the people that do purchase stuff from our stores. Otherwise, thanks for showing up. And there's other things happening tonight. So I know we've ran into some other shows, and then I still got a while before my show goes live, but apologize to the people whose shows I might have crammed in here with this rogue time slot. But again, appreciate Toby for jumping in for 2.5 hours. You've been on air now for like 10 hours this week between your shows and this one. Not to mention, I don't know what else you might have done. So thanks again for your time and everybody who's been paying attention.
My pleasure.
Probably throw this in there. My computer's acting funny, so I'm just going to end it with this without a big to-do.